Hey guys, this is Matt Invictus, and we're going to talk about a very important Batman story called The War of Jokes and Riddles, written by Tom King and drawn by Mikel Janin. When Tom King was announced as the new Batman writer, expectations were high. He was right off the success of the excellent Grayson series for DC and the critically acclaimed Vision series for Marvel, so most readers assumed his Batman run would be groundbreaking, or at least pretty good. But as the issues came out and readers became more acquainted with his take on Batman, it became pretty clear that Tom King is better at writing smaller titles and miniseries than he is at major titles like Batman, because his Batman run is a big pile of nothing. Is it terrible? No, not really. It just fails to really accomplish anything. The best way to describe it is pointless. Every arc has a few good moments that stand out, but all the important plot points usually happen in a single issue, which wouldn't be so bad if the build-up was good, but the majority of the run just feels like padding. Boring, senseless padding. At the moment, the run is more than 30 issues in, and the only important things to happen are a few developments for Catwoman and her relationship with Bruce. Which brings us to the War of Jokes and Riddles, an 8-part storyline consisting of a single important issue and a whole lot of pointlessness. There is some good stuff, but for such a long and important storyline, it is definitely a disappointment. I should point out that the writing in Tom King's work is often vague, ambiguous, and provocative. For that reason, my interpretation of the story may be different from yours. That's fine, it's a difference of opinion, but please don't tell me that I didn't understand the story or I'm just looking for reasons to dislike it. The events of War are framed as a flashback, with Bruce Wayne recounting them to Selina Kyle after proposing to her. Her answer to the proposal is the main draw of the arc, and the rest of the plot kinda takes a backseat to it. In fact, the events of the war aren't really relevant to the proposal at all. Selina herself is barely in the flashbacks. The entire War of Jokes and Riddles is, honestly, kind of unnecessary. That's my first big problem with the war. The second problem is that we don't really see it. Yeah, there are lots of splash pages of the villains fighting each other, and lots of dialogue about the destruction and casualties, but we don't really feel its effect on Gotham City. Say what you want about Scott Snyder's Batman run, but at least when something serious happened in Gotham, it felt like a large-scale event. The War of Jokes and Riddles just feels insignificant and trivial. Joker and the Riddler both fight the war in pretty much the same way, and there are no real distinctions between their actions, which is disappointing since it would have been a great chance to highlight the differences between them. And that brings us to another problem. The villains of the story are really fucking weak. You'd think the Joker would bring some entertainment, but in the context of war, he has lost his ability to laugh and is very grouchy because of it. Why has he lost his laugh? Because... reasons. Yeah, it's not really explained. So this version of the Joker is a massive bore. It isn't even that satisfying when he finally gets his laugh back at the end. Riddler is a little more entertaining and actually manages to energize the story at points, but he still lacks a lot of the traits that define his character. He doesn't have the eccentric, charming personality that made him such a memorable villain. I just don't like this super menacing and gritty take on Riddler. I think he should be a very formidable and dangerous opponent for Batman, but not a violent psychopath on the level of the Joker. There's plenty of other famous villains in the story, but if you were expecting them to actually do something, you'll be disappointed, because the other villains are completely superfluous and underdeveloped. Batman's rogues gallery should feel like the knights and bishops of this war, but instead they all feel like disposable pawns. Other stories like Hush and The Long Halloween made excellent use of the entire rogues gallery over a short run, but here they're all just window dressing. And since the war is set a few years into Bruce's time as Batman, you'd think characters like Robin and Batgirl would be heavily involved with the battle, but for some reason they fail to appear at all. Remember, DC doesn't have any bias against the Bat family whatsoever. There's a few things that I do like about this arc. The art is really good for the most part, and there's a few scenes and moments that really do stand out. 2 issues of the arc focus on a joke villain named Kite Man who has been popularized throughout King's run. Those issues are by far the most entertaining and well written, but they also contain the strange decision of giving this joke character a surprisingly tragic backstory. I wouldn't call this a bad decision, just a very confusing one that makes reading about Kite Man slightly awkward. Now let's talk about the ending. The climax of the war is a confrontation between Batman and the 2 main villains. This leads to a shocking revelation that Batman attempted to stab Riddler to death, but was stopped by none other than the Joker. A few problems with this. First of all is the reasoning. If Bruce had attacked Riddler because he was the more dangerous or threatening villain, then the moments might have been more powerful, but instead the comic has Batman attempt murder as revenge for Riddler killing Kite Man's son, and no other apparent reason. When you consider how many people someone like the Joker has killed at this point, it makes his attack on Riddler seem unjustified by comparison. The second problem is that this isn't even the first time Batman has considered killing an enemy. In Hush, he comes dangerously close to murdering the Joker, and is stopped by interference from Commissioner Gordon, making this major revelation majorly redundant. The story finally ends with an answer to the proposal. In light of Bruce's confession to Selina that the Joker prevented him from becoming a murderer, Selina agrees to marry him. This is obviously a huge and groundbreaking development for both of these characters, but unfortunately, the execution at this point has not been that good. The issues we've seen so far of Bruce and Selina's engagement have been just as empty and mediocre as you'd expect them to be. If you want to read a really good DC comic by Tom King, check out Mr. Miracle instead. I wouldn't recommend his Batman run unless you're a die-hard fan of the character. Thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe. Good night, everybody.